Ceará Global 2020, the future in 360 degrees, an event that deals with foreign investments and international cooperation, brought to you by Chambers of Commerce and Foreign Investments and Brazilian Portugal Chamber of Commerce and Ceará, sponsorship from ADESE, AECIP, APSV Advogados, the House of Representatives of the State of Ceará, BF Fortship, Banco do Nordeste, Bugabu Studio, Café Santa Clara, FIEC, QUER, Sebrae Ceará, SP Combustíveis, and Fortaleza University Unifor Edson Queiroz Foundation, co-sponsorship from Secretariat of Tourism of the State of Ceará, support from Casa Azul Ventures, Elephant Co-working, Federation of Chambers of Commerce, Brazil Africa Institute, JUSEC, Mango Ventures, France Observatory, Trends CE, Vetor Brands and Patents, Wins for Future, institutional support from Apex Brazil, FECOMERCIO Ceará, and Complexo do PC, technological support from Mob Telecom, iProject TI, Tape, organized by Prática Eventos and Move On. Media partner, Grupo O Povo. Ceará Global 2020. We now have yet another panel on our second day of activities. Now we're going to talk about something very important in international business, online sales. We have as a mediator Mário Gurjão, CEO from INOVAMUNDO, and our panelists will be Felipe Dellacqua, President of the Brazilian Association of E-Commerce Cross-Border, Kelly Couto, founder of Capital Econômico magazine, and Henrique Gonzaga, Executive Manager at FECOMERCIO Ceará. Ceará Global 2020. Check out this other panel. Well, we're here at Ceará Global 2020. With the future in 360 degrees, a very special edition, because this edition is totally online. And I'd like to thank the organizers, all of the organizers for the privilege and honor to be here learning with everyone that we're going to talk to, and I hope that this moment can be very enriching and also light. And I think that's the way that we can share our knowledge. So I'd like to welcome Felipe Dellacqua from the Brazilian Association of E-Commerce Cross-Border and Kelly Couto from Capital Economic magazine, who also works with journalism and digital marketing, and Henrique Gonzaga from the Research Institute of Ceará, IPDCD, linked to Retail Federation, and economist experience in governance. And so, I'm Mário Gurjão, I'm CEO of the business platform INOVAMUNDO. We work as a venture builder, making the connections between all of the players, companies from the state of Ceará, the real economy, and startups, innovation, and so that's what we've been doing. So I'm really here to learn with all of you and to facilitate this moment. So let's get going already. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'd like that Felipe could perhaps introduce himself first, then Kelly, and right after Henrique. Thank you. Well, it's a great pleasure. My name is Felipe Dellacqua, President of the Brazilian Association of E-Commerce Cross-Border. We're going to talk a lot about this, exporting via e-commerce, and also VTEX company e-commerce platform present in 34 countries. And so we have a lot of content to share with all of you in the next few minutes, and I'd like to thank once again for the invitation. I'm Couto, founder of Capital Econômico magazine. I work with digital marketing for some time now. It's a great pleasure to share insights and different experiences, especially during the pandemic. Everyone is migrating to digital platforms, and so we have a lot of content to share. My name is Henrique, Executive Manager at PDC, a research institute in Ceará, research institute at the Federation. So the goal here is to add a little bit to our knowledge, economic knowledge, to this discussion. That's the idea, really, to share some of the knowledge that we have in this discussion. In order to share all our knowledge. Well, I'd like to ask Felipe to explain to us, due to his experience, a little bit of your perception, Felipe, of the scenario in e-commerce, challenges and opportunities, and which is the cross-border concept, really. Okay. Well, Mário, we are going through a unique moment in the whole world. Of course, there's the negative side of the pandemic of COVID-19, but there's a very positive side, which is the acceleration of companies going digital. Definitely, this will be a legacy for future generations. And when we talk about going digital, this comes with globalization. And cross-border e-commerce surfs a similar wave, if you will. The other positive side, talking about this here in Brazil, the very weak Brazilian currency, the real. The end of last year until now, mid-August, we see the US dollar reaching almost 560, and the euro almost 6, the pound almost 8. All of the great currencies, moving up, and the Brazilian real weaker and weaker. On the one hand, that can be seen as negative, and after Henrique can talk to us more about the economic side of this, that makes Brazil purchasing power less. But those that produce in Brazil, Brazil can become more competitive. You imagine that our product today that we sell at 100 reais, the same product, if we just convert into one of these currencies, this product is going to cost around $20 or so. And so our product with our weak currency becomes very competitive in other markets. And when we talk about a market, to share some data, to make comparisons, when we talk about Brazil, just to have an idea, Brazil will probably finish the year with 100 billion reais only in digital channels for e-commerce. When we talk about other markets, North American markets, European markets, or more consolidated markets, only the US last year, $600 billion in digital channels with online sales. And in Europe, thinking about a very strong continent, the digital market, we have, amongst the large countries, a revenue of around 600 to 700 billion euros. When we bring these two markets together, and these are two markets that are basically 6 to 10 hours away from Brazil, with air transportation, we're talking about $1 trillion compared to the domestic market. So it's a huge opportunity for us to sell from Brazil abroad. And a great point to mention, the difference in exports for transborder e-commerce is that we're not exporting from one company to another, in a container, as we're used to seeing. It's a direct sale from a Brazilian company to the end consumer in another country, non-Brazilian, non-resident in the country. And with this, you have many advantages that we're going to talk more about later. But basically, to summarize a little bit, is to sell from Brazil to other countries in a market that's 40 times the size of the Brazilian market, and you're able to sell with a greater value and more competitive than selling only in Brazil. Let's think about this. We're talking a lot about exchange rate and the high dollar. And the question is that a window of opportunity? I mean, online sales abroad, they're usually seen as something seasonal, or are we talking about something more permanent? But seeing in this exchange rate the current relationship opportunity to come in. But hold on a little bit, because we're going to talk more about this. But now, thinking about this economically speaking, and sharing with Henrique your considerations, market size, United States and European countries, talking about 1 trillion. And so what's missing in order for us to take advantage of this market share, this opportunity? I mean, what are the challenges to get into this? Thank you for that, Mário. Felipe mentioned very well. The exchange rate is a great opportunity. The exchange rate at this moment, it was actually even better before. But anyway, it's very important to give more competitiveness to Brazilian products abroad. But other factors are also important. And, there's some structural aspects of the Brazilian economy that come into play. Brazilian products that are competitive in the international market, these are usually agricultural products or mining products, and that's sort of a problem. When we look at our comparative advantages comparing us with the rest of the world, because these are products that are not so good when we think about marketplaces or online sales or B2C sales. So, undoubtedly, we need to decrease the Brazil cost and increase the competitiveness of our companies, especially that have a high added value, average high prices. When we talk about high added value, we're talking about high margin, because another important component here in B2C sales is freight costs, and this can make things feasible or not, depending on the location. And when we talk about exports, this is still a high risk. And so I think where we can improve the competitiveness of this kind of industry in Brazil, that would really favor increase of our sales related to digital sales or B2C, as it were. So I think a change in this vision, I think, would be instrumental in order for us to obtain better spaces that are already good. Now, another analysis, the segment of marketplace and online sales had a boom, a total explosion this moment where we lived, and we're still living, restriction in the circulation of people. Sales had exponential growth. Major companies have had growth in some categories up to 400% in their sales. So these are, very relevant numbers. And it's a market with a lot of expectations. So when you see the value of the stocks of these companies, they
administrativa, enfim, uma
are
série de
quite high values. And so a moment of transformation, digital transformation, also a moment of tax reforms, administrative reforms, many discussions related to our social organization, and all of this is relevant to make us more competitive when we talk about sales abroad via digital channels. So I think during our talk here we'll be able to contribute a lot. After, like I did with Felipe, if you could comment a little bit more later on, what are these products? What do you see as the products where we can add more value? And also, what do you think could be done for us gradually to have more products in exports via e-commerce? I mean, what products are these, and how could we encourage greater participation of these products? But continuing here with the game, passing the ball to Kelly now, talking about C from B2C, that you talked about the consumer. I'd like to hear from Kelly, what have you been noticing as change in habits from consumers? I mean, what today is truly happening? What are the changes of perception and behavior of these consumers? And how does this correlate with e-commerce? What consumers, social media give a voice, a lot of action to consumers, and so consumers are having the power to decide. And that's the relationship you have nowadays. A consumer can check with a friend, check with a family member about a certain product. And so this whole issue of autonomy, if you will, when the journey of the user is more complete, the consumer feels more attracted by the brand. And so what happens now, during this period where we're all online, everyone is seeking more information before making a decision. And so is to provide a better experience to these users. And when this user feels attracted by the brand, when they're able to hear the voice of the brand, they have greater trust. And when we talk about B2C and to provide experience through B2B, so to sell abroad is a correlation within the scenario. To provide a purchasing experience, a safer journey. You don't let the user walk alone. And when you provide this moment to your consumer, when there is this experience, you take this experience abroad, the consumers that are out there, and everything becomes a lot more attractive for the brand and relationship with the consumer. Yeah, Felipe, could you answer that first thing I asked, if the exchange rate is a window of opportunity, and if this alone sustains the issue of e-commerce? I'm talking about cross-border e-commerce, or could we be thinking about more sustainable strategies in the long run? I mean, this is something seasonal, could be something seasonal, but now thinking about a second question and thinking more practically, not only here in Ceará, but I think this is a reality of our economy as a whole. Participation, a massive participation of small companies. And I think a question that's in the minds of those that want to work. Is it feasible for the small ones? What's the policy for small ones to start to use e-commerce? The current exchange rate is a period, interesting period for Brazilian retail. We can't deny that we can have greater margins with a higher US dollar. But, you know, when we put together a global website, for example, we don't necessarily need to convert the price of the product that I sell today here in Brazil into US dollar or into euro. The first step is to price for the final destination. So, a classic example, Havaianas in Brazil, we purchase Havaianas for 25 reais. Basically anywhere. The same Havaianas, they're sold in the US or in England, for example, $30 or $40. You make the conversion, the same product that's made here in Brazil, it's sold for 4 or 5 times more than it's sold here in Brazil. Why? Because that product was priced for that market and except paying that value for that product. So in practice, if I price my Havaianas flip-flops at $30, if the dollar is at 6, I'm making a lot of money. If it's at 5, I'm also making a lot of money. But the point, of course, is that this moment, a very volatile moment, where exchange rate is varying, you have a greater gain, but it's not necessarily just now, it'll be long-lasting. Now, another important point to mention is that Brazil is made for exporters. Unfortunately, Brazil is only seen nationally for exporting commodities, coffee, oranges, beef, we know this very well. But the major point is we have different tax breaks for those that export. And one of them, when you export, when you direct sale to a consumer abroad, that invoice that you issue, you're exempt from certain taxes. These are taxes that together could be 19%. And so, sales to the US, for example, I have less 18% of tax burden on that product, and also selling at a price in US dollar that can be 3, 4, 5 times what I would sell here in Brazil. So it's very advantageous today for Brazilian retail to sell out of Brazil. Now, another positive side, Mário, is that there are many Brazilians living in other countries, right? Anywhere you go, you see Brazilians, and Brazilians like Brazilian products. So it's very common Brazilians that live abroad, in the US, in Europe, or Asia, or even Africa, they look for Brazilian sites that can send these products there, because they want to continue consuming these products. Another point that you asked if this is going to continue or not has to do with the pandemic. Thank God, I hope the vaccine will be produced in the first quarter of 2021, but everyone experience what we're doing here, which is a video conference. Nobody will have to travel to the US or to other cities or states to do a 1-hour meeting, for example. So that consumer of trips, they're going to drastically reduce their trips. They're going to buy more online because they still want to buy products. And just to finish, I don't want to take too much time, there's this. This market is only for large companies, or what about small companies? And I think that is perhaps the major difference, because in order to sell to a client in another country, you don't need to change anything in your company. You don't have to really do anything. And usually a company that exports to another company via containers or customs, and what we're talking about here, you don't need. You're going to issue an invoice where in CFOP it's 7001, which is a sale for a non-resident in the country. And then an invoice you can issue via internet. The invoice, it's like a global invoice.
quando a gente importa produto, a gente paga em média, no acumulado, quase
to know that that product costs $10, $20, etc. And just to finish, something that's very curious. Here in Brazil, when we import a product, we pay on average almost 100% of imports, because it's 60% of the import tax, which is a federal tax, and then you still have other taxes on that amount. So in the end, it's almost 90%. In the US, for example, when you import a product you buy from a website in Brazil, for example, the limit there is $800. So if an American buys a product up to $800, this goes directly to the consumer's house. They don't pay all of these taxes. It goes direct. So the North American market, like I said, is 10 hours from Brazil by plane. And so you have possibilities to sell with greater margins, sell with less taxes. And if your product is up to $800, we're talking about 4,000 reais, and Henrique can also talk to us about the high added value. You can sell to Americans without paying an extra dollar in taxes, so it's very advantageous. And transborder e-commerce is here to stay. The pandemic accelerated things, and I really hope after this event that we can take advantage of these opportunities with Brazilian entrepreneurs, because your product can reach out to new markets, international markets, even consolidated markets like North America and Europe. Yeah, really quite optimistic. It's great. So, Henrique Gonzaga, or how can I call it? Henrique Gonzaga, or Henrique, it doesn't matter. Feel free. Okay, Henrique. So, you see this wide range of incentives that Felipe mentioned to us. I'm not going to say less taxes up to $800, like you mentioned, for those that buy tax breaks to export. What do you think needs to happen, since we're talking about Será Global? So, definitely, many people will be listening to us, but what do you think we need to do in order to turn this key? I'm very optimistic regarding the situation. I'm going to talk especially about Será, because Será in the last few years evolved a lot in terms of infrastructure, with the port, the new airport. So Será today has a very modern port, with a lot of productive capacity for cargo and transportation. And so that's one thing. Another thing, the modernization of the airports. So when we talk about exports and structural issues, the state of Será today is going through a very interesting situation, quite a comfortable situation, because of this modern infrastructure compared to the rest of the country. Okay. Furthermore, there are other movements, national movements, that also make me very optimistic. What are these movements? These are movements that discuss, for example, many advantages for payroll, for example. If we take into account economic theory, when you decrease costs, you become more competitive. So, for example, if we take a segment that works with major volumes, such as fashion, for example, fashion is a segment that involves a lot of labor, and so working with cheaper hiring models, this labor reforms, and so you give more competitiveness to local companies because they work with less complex cost structures. When we talk about a reduction or a situation where taxes are clear and we're talking about a cost structure that's less, that's leaner, and that means products. I'm going to talk about products that could be commercialized abroad, and they're not, really because of price, because of competitiveness. Now, another important point, and not only price, okay, not only price, but I see something complex, but I see us at the end of a wave, the end of a social political wave that's very full of conflict. And so basically what Kelly was talking about, when we talk about marketing, quality that's perceived, the perceived quality, which is what marketing tries, it's not only this, but it's what marketing tries to work on. And no longer talking about price, now we're talking about quality. We talk about products, added value products. Brazil, we suffered a lot with the image of Brazil in the last few years. And when we suffer with the image of Brazil abroad, it's difficult to create major Brazilian brands once we're always depreciating our image. This image has been depreciated because of many reasons, and that perhaps we were in a moment to reorganize ourselves. And anyway, our image wasn't so great, but I see Brazil in the mid and short term, we're decreasing many of these pressures, and I think Brazil could start to develop great brands. So we obtained great brands like Havaianas and Melissa as well, and others. And perceived quality. So there are some moments where we develop some great brands. And then talking about products where, in fact, we can generate value. So I'm also quite optimistic regarding Brazil because of these circumstances. I think we're already debating this. We have some things that are changing in Brazil, and I think once we pass this phase that Brazil is going through with some social conflicts, we'll be able to go back and be a society where people will desire our products, a society that has characteristics of happiness, very dynamic, that will call the attention of consumers. Yeah, it's interesting. Some geopolitical aspects and the dynamics of the economy, and also the issue of internal policies to encourage production. So really, I think that's really an important issue. You know, we need to minimize, decrease production costs to make our product more competitive. So I'd like to continue a little bit talking about the experience, consumer experience, and then we'll go back to macro environment. And asking Kelly, but also I want to ask Felipe. So Kelly, what do we need in order to improve the experience, the consumer experience? I mean, why do you think we're still kind of taking our baby steps in this sense? What can we do? What's the importance of this? If you can give us an example of a company that you know perhaps that provides this journey. And Felipe, the small size companies, because we talk a lot about Amazon, about Havaianas, we talk a lot about Magalu, examples that we consider consolidated, these major players that are very efficient in the use of their online channels. But I want to see if we can obtain an example, if we can say, examples of smaller companies that are doing well in this world of online commerce. So Kelly, if you could talk to us about the consumer journey. The consumer journey, we need to think about this. People are more connected nowadays, and so in my opinion, I think digital marketing is going to be a new concept. It's trust marketing. And how can we create this? The more time you spend on the internet, the more time you consume content. And as you consume content, I'm going to share with you an example. Besides an example, you talked about something very important, which is always giving an example of larger brands, but talking a little bit about the scenario. Currently, we have two scenarios. We have the scenario of essential services and the scenario of non-essential services. And when we talk about essential services, that alone, because of the moment, marketing is basically automatic. And when we talk about non-essential services, we get into another moment, which is trust marketing, to create high added value content in order to provide a better consumer journey. Now, talking about numbers, okay, and I'm going to use the example of large companies to inspire others, but major companies, when they decided to bet on the user's experience, they were able to translate this into very positive numbers. So, for example, I have some numbers here that I separated. Companies started to pay more attention to the consumer journey, the content that they consume on an app page or on a landing page on a website. When the company can transform the user's journey into something that's simple, it's easy to consume, then we can see the numbers. And so I have data here. 72% of businesses improve the experience when they had an improvement in 72%. And also when they checked CEOs and managers, 73% of those interviewed said that yes, they want to double their teams that promote this experience. And when you're able to see a large company, they're always evolving, they strengthen themselves in the market. How can I use this for a small business? How can I use this value for a small business? And so to provide a better journey for consumers, that's important. And now we're getting to your question, but how? So to create trust marketing, since my audience is consuming more, they're spending more time online, so trust marketing through assertive content so that they can have a more complete journey. And then Felipe perhaps can add with information, with the data that he has regarding foreign trade within the e-commerce platform. Yeah, before we hear from Felipe, just a quick example. And I think everybody is activating direct sales through WhatsApp, and I placed an order, and then after to check, whenever I would come in, the platform would tell me good morning, and sometimes just minutes. So the experience wasn't so good, because if I could tell this company that she had already wished me a good morning a couple of times. So, Yeah, that's
No
interesting
mundo dos bots aí, né, dos
because
chatbots,
in the
dessa
world of
interação,
chatbots,
eu acho que a gente
I
tem aí
think,
grandes experiências,
we
mas
have
ainda
some great
também muita
experiences, but
empresa engateando e tentando, né, adequar
we're still
os
trying
seus
to
processos de
adapt
venda, né?
sales
Exatamente,
processes.
até pegando um gancho no que você está falando, e aí quando a gente fala de experiência do
Yeah, when
usuário
we
e
talk
levando para as
about
pequenas
user
empresas,
experience and
hoje a gente tem muita
smaller
possibilidade do
companies,
WhatsApp,
we
né,
have facilities
você
with
automatizar canais de
WhatsApp
comunicação.
to
E aí para
automate
você foi uma experiência
things,
difícil, né?
and it's a difficult experience. I
Porque
mean,
você não queria mais falar bom dia, você já estava
because
em outra
you
etapa.
didn't want
Então,
to hear
quando a
good
gente fala de
morning
experiência, a
anymore.
gente
So when
não
we
fala
talk about
só do
experience, we're not only
conteúdo,
talking about the
ou a
content,
gente também não fala só do
not
design, a
only
gente
about
fala de
design.
conjunto de
It's a
estratégias
set
que
of
possa
strategies
reter a atenção do
where you
usuário,
can
que
keep the
possa
user's
converter, que
attention
possa
and
fidelizar. E
convert.
como que a gente faz isso?
And how do we do
Tentando,
this?
tem uma
Trying.
diferença muito
I mean,
grande
there's a
quando
huge
você leva um
difference
design, um
when
conteúdo,
you take design and
de uma maneira
content
muito generalizada,
in a
né?
very
Então,
general way.
vou até
So,
puxar uma sardinha um pouco pro meu
you
lado da
know,
comunicação, né? Questão de um conteúdo de um
we're
site,
talking
ali
about
você está
content
falando
from a
para um todo, você
website.
está falando para uma grande massa.
You're talking
Quando
to a
você
lot of people.
começa
Now,
a
when
fazer
you
a
start
venda do seu produto
selling
via
your
plataforma,
product
você
via
tem que pensar
platform,
que você está
you need to think
dialogando
that
com o seu
you're
usuário, está
talking to your
dialogando com o
users,
seu
you're talking
consumidor.
to your
Então, como que o seu
consumers.
consumidor
So
está
how
enxergando
is your
aquela experiência
consumer
de
seeing that
entrar no seu
experience of
app,
getting
fazer a
on your
compra,
website,
concluir o
purchasing,
processo de
finishing the
compra,
whole
né, efetivar o
process,
cadastro, preencher um formulário, por fim,
registering,
finalizar a compra.
etc.?
Então, é acompanhar essa
And so
jornada.
it's to follow this
E no
whole
meu
journey,
meio, justamente, a gente fala
and
muito
we
isso.
talk a
Beba
lot
de cada
about
fora, não
this.
deixe o seu usuário caminhar
Don't
sozinho
let your
nesse dia,
user
acompanhando
walk
cada
alone.
passo dessa
Follow
jornada,
him or her
para
step by step during
transformá-la
this
numa
journey,
jornada muito mais
so that it
positiva.
can be a
E isso
positive
vale
journey.
desde o
And
pequeno
this is
negócio,
from
mesmo que
small
você venda lá no
businesses,
finalzinho,
even if you just
desculpa, desde que
sell
você venda na sua casa, você
from
tira
your
foto do seu
home,
produto,
you
do
take
seu docinho, você coloca lá
pictures
na
of
venda no
your
Instagram, nas
products and
plataformas,
you put this on
as
Instagram,
grandes empresas que têm
and
todo um
large
time ali
companies that
cuidando
have a
desse
whole team
processo.
taking
A
care of this
gente tem
process.
exemplos
Yeah, we have
de pequeno,
examples of
dois.
small companies, small
O que vai
businesses.
acontecer na visão
What's
de
going to
vocês com a
happen
loja física dentro
with
desse
brick and
conceito,
mortar
né?
stores,
Onde
with
muita
physical
gente vai para o
sales,
digital?
where a lot
Qual
of
é o
people are
novo papel
migrating
da
to
loja
digital? What's
física?
the new
Vocês
role
puderem
of
aí
brick and mortar?
falar rapidinho para a
Can
gente.
you tell us
Eu
quickly
conheço
about
o
that?
Couto Ceará já
Well, I've been to
3 vezes,
Ceará 3
lugar lindo,
times now. It's a
maravilhoso.
beautiful
Como
place,
bom
it's a great
carioca, adoro
place.
lugar de praia
I
e
love the
calor.
beach.
E o mercado do Ceará é
And
um
the market in
mercado que tem
Ceará
bastante
is a
marca de moda
market that
praia.
has a lot
Tem
of
diversas marcas aí
beachwear
até bastante conhecidas no
brands, very
Brasil,
well-known
de moda
Sem
praia
beachwear brands
e de moda de esporte. E
and
quando você
sports.
pergunta, Mário,
So
algum exemplo de pequeno,
when you
eu gosto
ask
sempre de dar um
about
exemplo muito
example
legal.
of
Para quem conhece o Rio de Janeiro,
small
tem uma
players, if
cidade
you
no
know Rio
interior
de
chamada
Janeiro,
Nova Friburgo.
there's a city in the countryside called
Nova
Nova
Friburgo
Friburgo.
ela é
Nova
conhecida
Friburgo
no Rio de Janeiro
is
por
known
ser
in
uma
Rio de
grande
Janeiro
exportadora de
for
moda íntima.
exporting
Então, durante
intimate
muito
wear.
tempo, grandes fábricas de
And
moda íntima,
so
pequenas
many
empresas
factories, small
ficavam lá
companies,
na Nova
really
Friburgo.
in
E
Nova
aí, já tem
Friburgo.
uns 15 anos atrás,
And some 15
começou
years
a
ago,
iniciar um mercado
we saw a whole market
de moda de sportwear,
of
né, de roupas de
sportwear,
academia, calças legging, etc.
for
E tem uma
wearing to the
empresa
gym,
que é
etc.
uma
And there's a
lojinha
company,
pequena,
it's a
uma
tiny
loja chamada
shop
Honeybee.
called Honeybee.
Essa Honeybee era um
Honeybee
site no
is a
Brasil,
website
né? Ela
in
tinha
Brazil. I mean,
uma lojinha lá em Friburgo,
they
montou
had
um e-commerce
this
aqui no Brasil,
shop, they put
e esse
together an
e-commerce começou a
e-commerce,
vender
and then
os
started
produtos
to
de
sell
sportswear aqui no
their
Brasil, e
sportswear
ela acabou
products,
montando
and
essa mesma lojinha nos Estados Unidos.
they opened the same little
E essa
store in the
loja
US,
bombou de vender.
and they sold a lot.
O mercado
I
de
mean,
esporte, academia nos Estados Unidos, é um mercado
sportswear
muito
in
grande.
the US is a huge
E
market,
ele começou
and they
a
started
bombar,
booming,
pegou esse sitezinho dele na Amazon.com,
and then put
lá
this
nos Estados
website
Unidos,
on
e
Amazon,
começou a
and
bombar.
started
Quando você pergunta se
to
tem algum exemplo de
boom.
pequeno,
You have
eu adoro
example
dar
from
esse
a small
exemplo,
one. I love
porque
this one
ele era uma lojinha
because
do
it was
interior
just a
do Rio de Janeiro, de
tiny
Nova
shop
Friburgo, lá
from
pra
the
Serra.
countryside.
Você sair do Rio de Janeiro
To
pra
go
chegar
from
em
Rio de Janeiro
Friburgo,
to go to
demora
Nova
pelo menos ali
Friburgo, it
umas 2,
takes
3
2 or
horas
3
de
hours
estrada.
by car.
E ele é hoje
And
um dos
today
maiores
it's one of the
cases no
greatest
Brasil
cases in
de
Brazil
exportação
where they export
de moda de esporte
sports fashion to
Chegou
the
até
US.
hoje em dia, já tem uma
And
operação
they have
local
local
lá
operations
nos
there
Estados
in the
Unidos, operando
US,
ali
in Miami,
fazendo já
and, you know,
distribuição local.
doing local distribution.
Então, assim, quando o Henrique
So
falou
when
também de
Henrique
produtos de alto valor
talked
agregado,
about
né, e produtos de alta
products that
margem, o
have
mercado de moda
high
é um
margins,
mercado que tem uma margem muito
fashion
maior que o
has greater
mercado
margin than electronics or other products, where it's like 30-40% markup. Fashion, it can be 100%, 200%, 300%, depending on the type of product. So for Ceará, that's famous for beachwear. Ceará has a huge potential in taking these beachwear products. Brazilian bikinis, this is all over the world because, the cut, everything, you only have here in Brazil. So it's a product that's highly sought out. You can work with margins and you can have a lot of success selling abroad. Yeah. If you could give us your closing remarks now, from your point of view, what do we need to do so that e-commerce becomes a reality, more and more a reality?
Os medos, as barreiras de entrada, enfim, sejam mitigados e que a
so
gente,
that we,
o que a gente precisa fazer?
what do we need to do?
Resumindo aí,
in summary,
não vou
what do
gastar
we
mais
need to
tempo
do?
perguntando.
Eu acredito
Well,
que
I believe
todo
that
conjunto,
it's a set
Então,
of
assim,
things.
falando pela estratégia
So,
de marketing, eu
marketing
acho que é muito mais
strategy,
do que
I think
você
it's a lot more
ter planejamento, é claro, planejamento é fundamental, mas você
than just
justamente
planning.
gerar
Planning is
essa
important,
confiança
but
no
you
seu
need
consumidor
to bestow the trust of your
gerar
consumer
relacionamento.
and a good
Então, pra mim, a
relationship.
palavra-chave
So for
é
me, the
relacionamento.
key word is
Quando você gera um
relationship. When you
relacionamento com
have a
o
relationship
consumidor,
with your consumer,
não tem outro meio,
there's
não tem outro
no
caminho a
other
não ser
way
fortalecer
except
esses laços e conseguir fazer
strengthen
com que
these
esse
ties
ele se expanda, ele cresça ainda mais,
to expand and
principalmente
grow
agora nesse
more,
momento
especially
que
now
vem.
in this moment.
Com relação
Regarding
às minhas considerações
my
finais,
closing
eu vou dividir
remarks,
em duas,
I'm going to
tá? Mas
share
vou
this
ser
in
bem breve,
two.
até pelo tempo, tá? No que tange produtos,
Regarding
onde a
products,
briga é preço,
where
tá? Eu acho
they
que
fight
o que
for
nós podemos
price,
fazer é o que nós estamos
what we need to
fazendo,
do is
agora a
what we're
gente precisa
doing,
diminuir uma
but
velocidade muito maior,
at a
tá?
greater
Que é
speed,
reduzir
which
o
is to
custo Brasil,
reduce
né? Eu
the
acho que
Brazil
o
cost. I
Brasil
think
está
Brazil
fazendo isso, né? A
is
nossa
trying to do
sociedade já
this. Our
está
society
indo
is
nessa
going in
direção,
this
né?
direction.
Então, para os
So
produtos
for
onde a
products
gente vai para a guerra
where
de preço, eu acho que o ponto
price
é
is an
esse,
issue,
diminuir a
we
estrutura
need to
de custo
decrease our
nossa,
cost
tá?
structure
Desonerar os nossos
to
produtos
make
e
our
poder
products cheaper
comercializar a isso a
and
um
to
preço cada vez mais
commercialize at a
competitivo, tá?
competitive
Na
price.
outra
Now,
banda, né? E
on
aí
the
eu
other
chamo os
side,
produtos aí de
and
qualidade percebida alta, que é muito isso que a
those
Kelly
that
falou,
have
tá? É
high quality
melhorar esse
perceived is to
relacionamento,
improve
né?
this
Além do
relationship
marketing, né?
beyond
E para
marketing
melhorar
and to
relacionamento,
improve
inclusive quero dar como
relationship.
exemplo,
As an
tá? Um produto,
example,
um serviço que a Federação do Comércio veio
a
ofertando
product
agora,
that we've been
né?
offering,
Que é o Tá Fácil Comprar,
which
que é o
is
nosso
easy to buy,
marketplace,
which is
tá?
our
Aqui do
marketplace
Ceará.
from
Esse
Ceará.
marketplace
This
ele foi
marketplace was
concebido, tá?
conceived
Com o objetivo,
with
então ele
with an
libera o
objective, so
relacionamento
it's the
cliente-fornecedor, tá?
relationship
Para
between
ser
client
feito
and
entre
supplier,
cliente-fornecedor, não é um
and so it's
relacionamento
not a
feito entre o
relationship between
marketplace e
marketplace
o
and the
cliente, tá?
client.
Tudo isso para
All of
poder
this,
desenvolver também, tudo isso que a Kelly
all of
falou,
this
que
that
é essa
Kelly said,
vertente ou essa
the
habilidade,
skill
tá? do
of
fornecedor,
the
aí, ou do
supplier,
seller,
the
do
seller,
empresário,
or the
tá?
business
Em
owner
poder se desenvolver,
to
em poder
develop
desenvolver técnicas, em
develop
poder
techniques
aplicar técnicas de
and
comunicação no
communication
marketplace,
techniques in
tá?
the
Então a
marketplace. And
federação,
so the
inclusive, né,
federation
ela vem com essa
has this
proposta
proposal,
também, tá?
has this
Então
idea.
desenvolver um
So we
marketplace,
developed a
inclusive
marketplace, and
nossa
actually
ideia
our idea is
disponibilizar esse
to make this marketplace
setembro,
available
tá?
in September
Os clientes,
for
né?
clients,
Para o usuário seller aí, que é o
for
revendedor, ela já está disponível para
sellers. They
cadastro,
can
tá?
already
Então a
register,
gente viu como
and so
momento,
this
né,
is a moment,
ideal
ideal
aí,
moment,
dado tudo isso que nós conversamos
given
aqui,
everything we've
de
talked about
desenvolver
here,
essa
to
ferramenta
develop
e
this
poder
tool
proporcionar ao
and to
empresário local,
provide
ao
local
comerciante
businesses
local, tá? Essa
this
oportunidade
opportunity
dentro de um
in a marketplace,
poder, tá? Exercer aí toda a sua capacidade
in order to sell
em gerar qualidade percebida aos seus
and
produtos,
to generate
tá bem?
more
Eu acho que
perceived
vai mudar,
quality.
Mário,
I think it's going to
em relação à loja
change
física e à
brick
loja
and mortar
online,
stores
se
and
falava
online
muito, né, que a
sales.
loja física iria
We
morrer
thought
e
brick and
tal,
mortar
isso
stores are going to
definitivamente
die,
não
and
vai.
I don't think so.
O que a gente viu
But
acontecer na
what we see
prática,
happening in
até pela questão da
practice,
pandemia,
even with the
as
pandemic,
lojas físicas
brick and
permaneceram
mortar
abertas
stores
apenas
remained open
para questões
just for
logísticas, né?
logistics.
E na prática,
In
você fazer uma logística de uma
practice,
loja física
logistics of a brick
comprando
and
online,
mortar store
você
buy
gera
online,
eficiência operacional e eficiência logística.
there is
Consequentemente,
some efficiencies
aumentando
there,
a sua margem, porque você não
increasing
tem
your
que ter
margin because
um centro de
you don't have to have a
distribuição único
one
para poder
single
mandar o seu
distribution
produto para o cliente
center
final, né?
to sell your product to the final consumer. So really, you can gain efficiency in this operation as a whole, increasing your margins. And so omnichannel is going to become a reality, not only for large retail, but smaller retail. Sometimes we're talking about 15 square meters, and that's going to become more and more common. I think logistics in Brazil has evolved a lot, especially in the last 4 months. Everything was delivered through transportation companies, freight forwarders, companies stepping up to solve certain problems. And just to finish with what Kelly said, this point of brick and mortar stores, the contact with the client will always be via digital first, and then the experience at the physical store. They're going to choose the product in digital and perhaps check them out in the brick and mortar. They're going to purchase online or pick them up at the physical shop. So anyway, brick and mortar is a contact point, a point for experience, and digital is where the transaction happens. They're going to coexist, and I think all retail in Brazil will have these two things. Okay, our time is up, all right, but I'd like to say how great it was to be here with all of you, to talk to you, a lot of learning on my side, so much stuff to talk about. Of course, we couldn't even talk about technology trends, but we need to think about other moments, other panels. I think we talked about the importance of making production cheaper, improving the client's experience, putting the client first. Many opportunities. So, I'd like to thank Será Global. I'd like to thank all of you for this great moment. All right. So, all the best. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Kelly. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you very much. See you next time around.